I become a man of my words. In other words, if I promise someone to do something, I would do it. Whether or not I succeed, that's a second issue. I always try my best to do things that I promise people that I would do. I think I learned that from the Army. 2, I pay attention to being on time. I think I'm a fairly, on-time person, and I think I learned that when I was in the military.
Welcome to the SGV Master Key, a show where you will hear personal stories of triumph over failures and how others successfully navigated the unique landscape that is the San Gabriel Valley. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we have chosen the San Gabriel Valley for our home or businesses or both. We believe it is the people and small businesses that make this community great, and we love to share their stories with you. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at sgvmasterkey.com. Here are the hosts for the show, Russell Mono and Scott Warmoth.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the SGV Master Key. Thanks for joining us and spending this time with us, and we hope to bring you another great episode with another very special guest. Scott, before this show, we didn't really discuss how we're going to introduce this guest, but I've had a number of my own friends on the show, and it's always a pleasure for me to have them on and for you to experience that. And today it's sort of flipped, right?
Right. Yeah, because generally I have no friends, but this is one of my friends. Actually, I'm teasing him, but I was going to introduce him as a pillar of the community, which he is. He's the former mayor of Walnut, for example, and has been a real mentor and leader of a whole generation of community of people involved in the community, politicians and other types of workers in the community. But then he's also a lot of fun, and he's a person who, I said a long time ago, you can never get me to leave my house, right? But if Joaquin Lim calls me, I have to leave the house and go wherever he wants me to go. He's really been a very good friend to a lot of very important people, and I think they really recognize him as being, a very good friend to them. So, Joaquin Lim, welcome to our show.
Hi, Scott. Hi, Russell. How are you guys doing?
All right. I hope you can live up to, my expectations.
Well, thanks for all those compliments. I'll take it with a question mark. But Scott and I have been good friends for at least 12, 13, if not more years.
Something like that, yeah.
And those of you who might know Scott, he's kind of a semi-hermit. After work, he just would not venture out anywhere. And somehow, I'm just so glad that I have the ability to lure you out of your house.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I've always been able to talk to him about things. And so, I felt comfortable. And but you have been that kind of person for, as I said, a whole generation of leaders that have come after you in the San Gabriel Valley.
I guess I was one of the very first Chinese American persons to be elected to a position within, in this case, a city. I first got elected to the Walnut City Council back in 1995. Mm-hmm. So that was 26 years ago. At that time, Chinese people were beginning to move in the San Gabriel Valley, mm-hmm. including myself. And I think I would be very similar to other Chinese people who have chosen San Gabriel Valley to move into, primarily because of the school districts. I had 2 daughters at the time. They were very young, 5 and 6, and I was a single dad at the time. And I worked at the Defense Department at LAX, and so there was a long drive for me every day. So what I really wanted for my 2 daughters, to have is security. And security comes in many shapes and forms. In this case, when you're a single dad of 2 young daughters, the choice of a good school district was number one on my list. Even though I'm a city person, I grew up in Hong Kong 50, 60 years ago. Back then, the building that I lived in, had like 5,000 people. And all of a sudden, I live in the city of Walnut. At that time, it was like 12,000 people. Yeah. But because of my kids, I said, hey, I'm going to go live in a suburb, find a place nice and quiet, there's not much bad influence. That's why I picked Walnut, and I'm so glad. And I got a chance to meet a lot of people. So back then, there were not too many Asian Americans who ran for public office. And I guess I was one of the first few ones back then.
Why did you do it?
Oh gosh, long story. If I told you that I've always wanted to serve, to be a politician, I'll be lying. I was pretty much motivated to run for city council back then because of a project that the city was about to approve. That was the Target. They were going to bring a huge super Target store into Walnut. And those of you who know Walnut or been to Walnut, you realize it's a very small community, and basically, it's very residential. Yes, we have businesses in Walnut, but it's mostly just moms and pop stores, right? I mean, serving the local needs. And all of a sudden, they want to bring in a big box retailer like Target. And people in Walnut at the time were up in arms. And back then, I was just simply going to work every day, at LAX. My office was near LAX. And then we'd drive the 2-hour home back to Walnut. And back then, the only thing I would do when I get home is to eat dinner, take care of my kids, and become a couch potato. Never thought I was going to be involved with the community at all. Mm-hmm. But that Target project really, I guess mobilized me and a few other people to be involved.
Did that Target go in?
No. But it got put in less than half a mile from where I live in the city of Diamond Bar on Grand Avenue. So people say, Joaquin, what did you do? I mean, there's still a Target, but the other city is getting the revenue. We're not getting the revenue. Oh, that could be true if you're revenue oriented. But I think a city can think of other ways to make revenues other than, in my opinion, right, bringing a business in that would just kind of like disrupt or distort the entire picture of the serenity of Walnut. And I was so glad that a lot of people in Walnut at the time supported me, and that's how I became an accidental city council member.
But what's amazing to me is that I've always felt like everybody in not only the San Gabriel Valley, but Los Angeles. Again,
I think that it had to do with the fact that I was one of the very few Asian American elected officials at that time. So supply and demand. I mean, when you're one of few, people pay more attention to you.
I see.
Versus now in LA area, there's probably at least 50, if not 60, elected officials who are Chinese Americans. So all of a sudden, they're not as rare as used
But
to
you
be.
started the Chinese American elected. What is it called?
It's called the CEO Association, right? Yeah, I was one of the founders. Just like Congresswoman Judy Chu was one of the founders. Back then, we thought that as few as there were, I think it makes it even more important for us to get united. Because otherwise, there's not a central power, if you will be. And I'm happy to report to both of you that right now the CEO Association, we have over about 100 members already.
That's Chinese elected officials is what
Chinese
CEO.
American elected officials, right? And we have members include Congress people, assembly members, senators, and
state officials, all kinds. Many state officials.
Right. But mostly local, because right now you see, I wouldn't use the word proliferation yet, but you see a big group of Asian Americans interested in in local politics. And some of them would even, go further into state positions and federal positions. And that was one of the things that we thought about when we formed the CEO Club, is to encourage, motivate, and support more people to run for public office. And I'm glad that in a sense, I think we've been fairly successful. Although the Asians are still being looked upon as a group with relatively little political power as compared to the Hispanics or to the African Americans. But we're working on it. We're working on it. And we need people like Russell and like Scott, who support the good Asian causes. Not all Asian causes are good, the good ones, and try to, help out. I think that's very important.
I know the visual audience may be going haywire right now, and the listening audience is, why is his name Joaquin? And why is he saying that he's Chinese? So I want to get into that. And then I also want to understand your life in Hong Kong and what developed you to who you are today and to eventually come over here. But can you first share with the audience about your name?
Joaquin, of course, is Spanish. And my dad, who had passed away, he was what's called Filipino Chinese. He was actually of Chinese descent, but he was born in the Philippines. So my dad hardly even spoke Chinese, spoke mostly English and Filipino. And that's why we all have Spanish first names, Joaquin, Lorenzo, Maria, Jose in our family, but none of us speak Spanish. So it's a very interesting combination. But my middle name is Anthony. So it's Joaquin Anthony Lim. So that's Hispanic, Italian, and Chinese. And that helps when I run for public office, because Lim, my last name, could be Korean or could be Chinese. So when it comes time for me to go campaigning, right, the Korean people think that, oh, he's Korean, let's vote for him. The Chinese think, well, he's Chinese, let's vote for him.
So you're sort of uncertain.
Of uncertain origins, origins, right. And your second question was...
can you share with us your early life in Hong Kong? What was that like?
Okay. That's an excellent question. Actually, on my way over here today, I thought about, hey, what will we be talking about? I think one of the things that I'll be very interested to talk about is the fact that as I was a young kid growing up in Hong Kong, I just had this affinity, this love for America for some reasons. I remember I used to watch mostly American TV shows, even though back then American TV shows were very hard to come by because they were very expensive for TV stations in Hong Kong to purchase American shows. And back then, my most favorite American shows were Route 66.
Oh, yeah.
Russell, you might be a little too young to know the show, but Scott, you remember the show,
right?
I
remember it. And Route 66 isn't it
Azusa.
Right over here? Azusa.
Yeah, Azusa, right.
Yeah.
And then I always have loved music, and I grew up at an age, with the British, pop, remember the pop song thing. So like I was really into music, and two of the TV shows that I really enjoy watching while in Hong Kong, one of them was called Shindig.
Oh, Shindig.
You remember Shindig?
Oh, of course.
And then Hollywood A Go-Go.
Oh, yeah.
Then there's also Playboy After Dark with Hugh Hefner in the Chicago thing, right? Because
you've never given up that show.
Oh, never given up that show because I was so into music, and and sometimes you see your favorite groups, Sonny and Cher, Steppenwolf. Oh my God, I want to watch the show.
Yeah, Shindig. Was that Gary Holt who was the DJ, or it could have even been Casey Kasem?
I think at one point Casey Kasem and Victoria saying, "Who are these people? I have no idea who these people are." Victoria is a young technician, right?
Yes. But she'll learn. She'll learn all these names. Yeah.
But Russell, so it was because of this love for America that I had since I was young. And I have no idea, how I became so fond of America that I told myself at that time that my goal is to go to an American college. And because of that, I could say this, I deliberately flunked my college entrance exam in Hong Kong so that my parents won't send me to a college in Hong Kong.
Wow.
I did so poorly in my college exam thing so that my mom would say, okay, I guess we have no choice but to send you somewhere. So they sent me here.
Wow. And you came over as a teenager to go to college then?
Yes, I actually, my story is kind of like a movie in a way. I was actually adopted out of China because my family was so poor. So this family from Hong Kong and the Philippines went to adopt me out of China. So I left China at age 2. We went to live in Hong Kong, and I lived there for about 17 years. So yes, I went to all my schooling, in Hong Kong. Because Hong Kong at that time was British, so I went to a British school. I went to a boarding school actually, and I hung around with a lot of British kids and American kids and all that. And those are really fond memories. But because of that, I've always told myself that, hey, I want to be an American.
You may think I'm joking, but you're not wearing your American flag right now. Usually he's wearing a pin, American flag.
When I have my suit and ties on. Yeah. Today is casual day, so.
Yeah, I mean, you're
oh, you noticed that, huh?
Oh yeah, we've talked about it too. I know.
Yeah. Because that flag, as symbolic as it is, means so much to me. Because first of all, my dream to be in America has come true. Second of all, America's been so good to me. This is where my 2 daughters were born. My granddaughter was born. This is where I went to college. Every now and then I'll run into some people to say, oh, Joaquin, you speak English with an accent. You're not true American. And I'll sit them down over a beer and say, okay, let's talk about being a true American, right? And I would always ask them, have you been in the service? No. Well, I've been in the service. And not the Chinese army, the U.S. Army, okay? So in that way, I'm more American than you because I serve our country. I said, have you served your community in some capacity? Well, no. Well, I think I'm more American than you because I've served my community for 17 years. So in any meaning of the word, right, being patriotic, I just feel that I owe so much to America. And that's why whenever I wear a suit, I always put the American flag on. I mean, just to show that how much I appreciate this country. We have problems. Let's face it, okay. But I feel so proud to be living in this country and not, for example, I could still be in China now if I wasn't adopted by my parents. And I just feel so thankful and grateful that I've made America, the country of my choice. And Scott Russell, you might know that I recently had COVID. Mm-hmm. And I was actually in a hospital and a rehab for over a month and a half. And
yeah, do you want to, there's several things that we could discuss, but I thought that would be one interesting one. And of course, there's your special feeling for your service in the Army, mm-hmm. Which we should talk about. What do you want to talk about first? Your COVID experience, maybe?
Anything that you want me to talk about.
Because I found out accidentally that you had been in the hospital for about 2 weeks when I found out. And I didn't know. You didn't really tell anybody. But you were here in Arcadia Methodist. It was the second hospital that you stayed in. Talk about the COVID and how you thought your life was over and what it has done for you since then.
It was one of the most traumatic experiences I ever had. I'm 70 years old and I never been in the hospital, never been sick, really. But that COVID that I had, I really thought I wasn't going to make it. In fact, I was drawing up my will. I was updating my living trusts because I really thought my end was near. And I think I caught COVID after the Christmas peak last year, right? Remember the experts were always saying, well, after a major holiday like Christmas, right, there's going to be more cases of COVID. And I think that's when I caught COVID because I actually went to lunch with 6 people. And we were in a little private room at a restaurant. And of those 6 people who had lunch together, 3 came down with COVID. I was one of the 3. So me and another person, we tested positive, and we were in the hospital. He was luckier. He was in the hospital for no more than 3-4 days. And then I stayed in 2 different hospitals for a total of over 3 weeks. And after that, I went to rehab for another, 3 weeks.
How long after the dinner did you start to experience symptoms, and what were they?
After the dinner, my friend called me the next day saying that, hey, I tested positive. And I said, oh, okay, all right, I'm going to go get tested too. And guess what? I tested positive as well. But prior to that, I must have had at least 10, if not a dozen tests, because I've always been I'm a hypochondriac. I'm so afraid of dying and catching disease and all that. And so when I look back at the fact that I had COVID, and there's no one else to blame but myself, because I did not listen to the experts saying that if you go out, first of all, don't go out to eat with people that not in your household. Second of all, there's all kinds of things that say you shouldn't do, but guess what? I did it, and I paid a very hefty price for it. But throughout this traumatic experience, a lot of good things, came out. One, I'm so much closer to my family. When I say my family is actually very small, just me and my 2 daughters. I've always been close to them.
And your grandchild.
And my grandchild, because she's only 5, Sequoia's only 5. But with my 2 daughters, I was a single dad. I raised them as a single dad. And I had a pretty stressful job because I worked at the Defense Department as a negotiator back then. So, after a long days in the office, long drive, you go home and you have 2 teenage, at that time, there was not even teenage kids to, having to take care of, right? You got to cook dinner for them, help them with their homework, and then, make sure that they go to bed in time, and then after that, I'm so exhausted. I hit my bed and then go to sleep. The next day, early, I get up again. So I did that for many years, but looking back, trying to roll that into my overall American experience, I'm just so thankful that this country gave me this opportunity and this platform, if you will, for me to build my life up. And so I'll always be grateful, to America. And whenever in other words, in fact, if you call my cell phone, and I think Scott knows it, right?
Yes.
What's the song that plays on my...
The Star Spangled Banner.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's my what do you call those?
The ringtone.
The ringtone. That's my ringtone. Is the national anthem.
Yeah.
And it's always such a conversation piece, because sometimes when I go into the subway, like in San Francisco or somewhere, I will forget to turn it off, and then it will ring, right? People will start look at me. Oh, it was funny. Let me tell you another story. So when I ran for city council the first time around in Walnut, I was thinking about how do I market myself. Walnut back then was still a pretty conservative little town, mostly Caucasians, very conservative, Republican, mostly. So here I was, a Chinese-looking guy with a Spanish name, right? How are they gonna receive me and then hopefully, support me? And then I talked it over with several friends, and at that time I didn't know you guys yet. Otherwise, I would have consulted with you. Talked with a couple of friends. They said, you know what? I mean, you gotta find some common ground with an average person in Walnut. I'm scratching my head. What kind of common ground? And all of a sudden, it dawned upon me that the common ground is our love for our country, for America. And of course, we display our love for our country in many different ways. In my case, it was my service with the United States, Army, for 3.5, years. And I'm just so glad that 3.5 years pretty much changed my life around. Because when I went to college, it was a good old hippies day, right? My hair was down to there, rock and roll music all day long, Didn't really care about anything until I joined the Army, and the Army really straightened me out.
Oh, so you went into the Army after college?
No, I actually went to college before I graduated. because my first year in college, I'm happy to share with you that I was on Dean's List the whole year.
Yeah, Wisconsin.
In the second year, I started to hang out with some friends, and oh my God, and then my life just got turned upside down. So in my junior year, my GPA was dropping so quickly that I was scared that I'll be kicked out of college. And I've always wanted to be the first person in my family to go to college, which still is the case, other than my daughters, of course. So I said, hey, I gotta find a way to straighten myself out. And what better way than to join the Army? So I dropped out when I was a junior. I went into the service for 3.5 years, got myself all straightened out, and then went back to college, finished my college, and then went to grad school. I've always told younger people this story. People say, oh, I don't like college. I'm not doing well in college. Don't worry, man. Take a break, right? So I told them about the break that I took. And I guess I still came out
break
okay.
in the Army. Huh?
Oh, yeah, 3.5 years break in the Army. Yeah. Some people, we all mature at a different rate, if you will. Unfortunately, at that time, I just wasn't quite mature for my age.
And now are you?
Depends on who I'm with. If you with the two of you, it's difficult. It's called bad influence.
Is that at Wisconsin at Madison?
No, the UW system has many campuses. Wisconsin system. I was at a smaller campus called Superior, which is by Lake Superior, way up northern part of Wisconsin.
I asked because that's where my father went. And
Wisconsin? Madison?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, Madison is the place where everything was happening.
Yeah.
All the rock and roll.
A lot of protests. It's a very liberal.
Anti-war thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Back then, right?
But he experienced a lot of racism there.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
One winter, they paper machéd his vehicle, newspaper and water, so it just froze. And another winter, they put his vehicle in the lake.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I guess I've always been very fortunate in the sense that I never felt that I've ever been discriminated against. And I guess the way I deal with it is try to be one of them, right? If you are one of them, right, usually, if they accept you, obviously, right? I mean, that's how I survived Army. Because when I went into boot camp, I was like a really skinny little guy. I was like 115 pounds, right? And versus the other, GIs, man, huge, big, guys. So and at that time, many of the people in my company, in my battalion, I wouldn't say many, but some of them actually were former gang members. I guess back then, if you get into trouble, the judge would give you a choice if it's a misdemeanor, and you go to jail for, I don't know, a little while, versus, hey, do you want to go into the service? Right? So they actually chose to go to service. So all of a sudden, I find myself in the company of some gang members. And of course, they wanted to mess with me. So I said, how do I survive this thing, right? 3 years is a long time in the Army to be hanging around with, with people that you don't like or they don't like you. So I thought of two ways. One is to make sure that my supervisor likes me. Because once my supervisor likes me, he or she will take care of me. He'll protect me, yeah. And two is not to show them that, that I'm different from you. So the way I did that was kind of funny when I think about it now. So I was really skinny. I was little. I wasn't athletic. I didn't have any muscle, no six packs. So I gotta protect myself. And the way I protected myself was to pretend that I knew Kung Fu. No, seriously, because back then a lot of the young recruits, right, especially from the South, from the Midwest, they've never really seen a Chinese person, so they only seen like Bruce Lee in the movie, right? So they think every Chinese is a Bruce Lee. Well, then I'm gonna pretend that I'm a Bruce Lee. So when they come up to me and cause trouble, I'll do one of those Bruce Lee stand, right? How you wouldn't say anything, look at you, and I'll do that. Some of them, hey man, I don't want to mess with you. It's cool, No, seriously, I survive it like that. They still think that I know Kung Fu.
Well, that's how I was afraid of you. I thought you knew Kung Fu.
You know Kung Fu, right? Well, now I Kung Flu.
Well, it's funny because on the episode that we did on me, the exact same thing happened to me in basic, that they had never seen an Asian before, and they just assumed that I knew some martial art.
But you look like you knew martial art because he's so well built. Not me, man. I'm a scrunchy little Chinese guy.
So what you said, the Army? What did you do in the Army?
Actually, I wanted to be a pilot, but then I flunked my eye test because I guess my night vision, it was so poor. I can't differentiate between different depth or colors of different foliage. They said, no, you can't fly. I said, well, if I can't fly, I want out. It's too late. You already signed the paper, right? And I said, can you assign me to anything to do with aviation? So I ended up being a helicopter medic.
MASH.
MASH, yeah. I was actually stationed with the MASH unit in Korea. Anyone knows what MASH stands for?
Mobile Army Surgical Hospital.
You are good. Oh. You are good, Russell. Was that an educated guess, or did you just kind of like make it out like MASH?
I mean, I knew it had to do with medical, and so I just.
But that's pretty good. Right, I mean, he got every one of those 4 letters right.
Right.
Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. So I actually brought with me today a yearbook from my days as a U.S. Army helicopter medic. I was with the 377 medical company, which at that time was the MASH unit in South Korea. My main base actually was in Osan, California. I don't know if Scott had been to Osan or not. That's a major U.S. Air Force base.
I don't think I have.
Oh.
Yeah, I know it. I've heard of it. I just by coincidence, I lived in Korea at the same time he lived there. Oh. So I would sometimes go to his, of course I didn't know him, but I would go to Army bases occasionally.
Really?
Oh, yeah, they would. I was a Peace Corps volunteer.
Oh,
but they would let us
as
go
a guest.
Yeah, they would let us go. So we would go to Camp KC, which was the main one.
Go to the PX and
they
buy American shampoo.
Yeah, I was always shocked to go onto a base because I had never been on one before, and I just couldn't believe how it was like a small town America.
Oh, you got everything. You got airports. You have
theaters.
You have nightclubs.
Yeah. And of course I didn't know Joaquin then, but now thinking back to my time there in the streets of Itaewon, I think I remember seeing MPs haul you away a few times from some of those clubs
because they thought that I was Kung Flu. Yeah.
Were you close to the DMZ?
No, my my home base actually was in Osan. Osan is probably like
south.
Yeah. Although I spent a lot of time in Seoul, because back then there was a major U.S. Army hospital in Seoul called 121st Hospital. So I was pretty much attached to the hospital, but because we were flying in helicopters, right? So like between Osan and Seoul, I forgot what the flight time was. Really quick.
An hour and a half.
Yeah, maybe even less, yeah. So I was stationed there for 3 years, and I practically flew all over Korea. All the U.S. Army bases I've been to. And, looking back, I really appreciate the experience that I had. Although at that time I didn't think it was anything, right? You know how sometimes in our life, when you're in the middle of something, you never really step back and say, "Wow, this is something meaningful that I'm doing. It's something that it's a conversation, topic, But now I realize, and whenever I talk to people about my U.S. Army helicopter days, they say, "Wow, really?" And we have a lot of stories to tell.
It was a fun time, wasn't it?
It was a fun time, yeah. It was a fun time. Vietnam War was just over, right? I enlisted in 1976, and the war was officially over a year before that, in 75, right? But see, Scott, when you were in Korea, if at that time you ever got sick and you need to be evacuated, you'd probably be on one of my birds.
Yeah, right. Because you would do that with civilians too?
Oh yeah.
Any American citizen?
we sign contract with any civilian military American, any embassy staff from France, Germany, Canada, and certain other countries. Yeah, I guess they have a contract with the hospital, U.S. Army hospital, so that they will get treated in a U.S. Army facility and not in a local facility.
Did you spend 3 years there?
Yeah, I spent 3 years there.
It was all there, huh?
Oh yeah, and then I met my first wife there, a Korean, very nice Korean lady with whom I had 2 daughters. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of love for that country. I think the people are beautiful. I think the language is beautiful. The food is tasty. And I'm so proud of what Korea has done globally, right? I mean, look at their product, Samsung, Hyundai, and look at how they project their soft power, right? Look at BTS. I'm sure you like them, right? the K-pop group, right? Look at the guy who sang Gangnam Style. I forgot. Psych. What's his name?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, something like that, right? Yeah. And Korea done very well with trying to create very positive image of their own country.
And when I lived there, and I was more in the community probably than you were, but I would have never guessed that it would become this prominent of a influential, I guess, country and culture that it was, because it was at that time, it was dirt roads and, these old buses and, you just didn't see that what it has become, that was there at the time.
I think there's 2 attributes. There's 2 reasons. One, Korean people, like Chinese people, are very hardworking. They work very hard. And 2, Koreans actually are very politically astute. Look at how Koreans influence the Los Angeles politics. If you go to Koreatown is about the only community within LA that I could see where the sign ordinance is so loose. Have you ever noticed when you go to Koreatown, a lot of signs are just in Korean. You don't see any English. Why is that? Because in most other communities, right, they will say, okay, this is America. It's okay to have a Korean or whatever other foreign language, but you got to have an English sign on it. But somehow Koreatown, they just, I guess they don't have to do it. And if you look at how they participate in the local political scene, right, they are a force to be reckoned with. Look at right now we have 2 Korean American congressperson, right? Yang Kim.
Both from out basically in your area.
Michelle Steele. Michelle Steele, even though her last name is Steele, but she's Korean, right? And then on the East Coast, we have a Congressman Kim. I forgot his first name. So they've come a long way, but I think they're very smart. They know how to be politically correct. Like they never really gone against the United States, for example. Always been our ally. Versus some countries, and I won't say names right now, who want to just become our arch rival enemy, and I just don't think that's smart. Anyway, that's another topic. Let's not go into the politics. We'll be here forever.
You mentioned that your reasons for joining the Army was to maybe change how you were performing in school. I'm interested in what you observed in yourself following the Army. And I assume you went back to school, but let's take a quick break and we'll come right back.
The legal process can be intimidating. You don't know where to start and you're unsure of what to expect. The attorneys and staff at the law offices of Scott Wormuth have been serving the San Gabriel Valley for over 35 years. Helping people just like you navigate through the legal process and ensuring you're treated fairly. You can find them at law888.com or call 626-282-6868. That's 626-282-6868.
All right, we're back with Joaquin. Before the break, I was going back to that moment where you decided to leave school to join the Army, and what did you develop in the Army? What changes came about from that?
I think 2 major changes. which had to do with how I clean myself in a way. One is I become a man of my words. In other words, if I promise someone to do something, I would do it. Whether or not I succeed, that's a second issue. I always try my best to do things that I promise people that I would do. I think I learned that from the Army. Two, and I think Scott could be a good witness to that, is I pay attention to being on time. I think I'm a fairly on time person, and I think I learned that when I was in the military. I mean, you couldn't be late for anything. You couldn't even be late for lunch. The chow hall mess hall will be closed. You won't have lunch, right? So prior to that, I just had no concept of time. Being timely. Punctuality and those didn't mean anything to me. But after that, I picked up at least these two habits, if you will, and I think that had enriched my life in many ways, both as a professional negotiator for the government and also for Boeing aircraft, for McDonnell Douglas, for Rockwell International, and for Lockheed. So I worked for all these big companies, as a negotiator within a corporate environment. And so you need to do the right things, if you will. And those two things that I just mentioned, being on time and keeping up your promise, I think that helped me quite a bit with my career and just with me as a person in general. I think friends that know me well, they all know that I always try to be on time. I'm very, very seldom late.
No, I can attest to that, definitely.
Yeah, it's like today, Russell, you asked me to be here at 12:55.
1:55.
1:55, sorry. Actually, I got here at 1:15 because I didn't want to be late. So I kind of hang around the neighborhood, do my texts, and email things. And
that's a respectful thing,
I think it is, and thanks to my drill sergeant, back in boot camp, thanks to my first sergeants, who always yelled at us, and
because I've been on trips with Russell and with other people, not with Russell, with Joaquin, and he will tear into them if they're late, and he'll make it clear from the very beginning that you've got to be on time.
Yeah, well, yeah, I wouldn't say I tear into them, but I would definitely.
I've seen some bodies that laying out there. I think you tore into them.
I would remind them that, hey, look, I mean, as small as a thing as you think it is, right? Oh, let's meet for 12 o'clock, for lunch. But to me, that's a contract. It's a contract. You and I sign a verbal contract. We're gonna have lunch at 12 o'clock tomorrow at this place. And it's a contract. You gotta perform your contract. That's the way I look at it. But sometimes I think I overdo it, Scott. Sometimes my former wife did not appreciate it.
Yeah.
And some people are just not punctual. But I'm at a point where I think after COVID, I'm telling myself I gotta be more. I gotta chill more.
Yeah, because you're OCD to the nth power.
Oh my God. You think
OCD. I'm OCD. Here is like the worst example.
Look, I'll give you some of my very bad OCD examples. Right now, when I travel, I just came back from Hawaii. Even though when I went to Hawaii, I still brought with me an extra suitcase. And what's in there? My pillowcase, my pillow, my blanket, my beddings, my towels. It's getting really, really, really bad.
It gets tiring, doesn't it?
It gets tiring. It gets expensive. So you have to pay for the extra, luggage. But I rather pay than sleep in a place where and I love to go to Japan, and I go to Japan a lot. And Japan is known for its cleanliness, right? Everything is so neat and tidy. But even when I go to Japan, I still bring my own beddings.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah. I still
and when he first came to this, you know how I am, pretty bad, right? In terms of OCD, and keep things super clean. And this house is considered dirty by Joaquin's standards. He he examined my stove to make sure there were.
Did I really do that?
You did. You noted it was too dirty for you. You would have cleaned it a little better.
I don't know. I guess I'm at a point where I think I need professional counseling. It's getting really, really bad. I get completely freaked out if it's not clean, whether it be a home, someone's home, or a kitchen, or restaurant or something. And so one thing that I really struggle with living in San Gabriel Valley, because we're talking about San Gabriel Valley, is the fact that, it's full of, so many wonderful restaurants, right? Different ethnic foods. But for me, I love to eat out, but I'm just so picky about, I got to eat not at the best tasting place, but the cleanest place. So a lot of people say, Joaquin, you go eat at Panda Express? That's not real Chinese food. But I go there. Why? Because it's clean. Right? You see all the vegetables are cut up nicely, in a plastic container, all stored away, right? And so I'd rather eat not authentic Chinese food, but clean Chinese food than authentic, but not so clean Chinese food.
One of the things you often hear in the San Gabriel Valley is, to choose a restaurant, the better ones have the C rating.
Well, I'll tell you a story about that. About 15 years ago, I was involved with a project with County Supervisor Michael Antonovich, who had, of course, since retired, right? So back then, I was so concerned about the sanitation standards of the restaurants in LA County. There's like 25,000 restaurants registered in LA County, and a big number of that would be Chinese restaurants. So I was so concerned about how many of the Chinese restaurants were not very clean, in my opinion. So at that time, I was lobbying for the county to implement a system that would allow consumers to know before they patronize this restaurant their sanitation standards. Even though the restaurants within LA County are required to keep a copy of the inspection report on file, right? So if you go into any restaurant, you could walk up to the manager and say, I want to see a copy of your sanitation report issued by the LA County Health Department. And they're supposed to show it to you. But how many people would do that? So back then, we were lobbying for the county to post A or B or sign outside the restaurant. So I was involved with the project. But the story I wanted to tell you is when we talk about C, because unfortunately many Chinese restaurants at that time had a C rating. And the joke is, you have A, excellent rating, you got B, pretty good rating, and C stands for Chinese restaurants.
Oh no.
So back then, Antonovich and I, we shot a PSA commercial, and that was actually shown for almost a whole year in LA County.
Oh, really?
Yeah, him talking and me talking about, when you go to a restaurant, make sure you look at the sign, A, B, or C, right? Yeah.
Well, now I know how to better mess with you if we ever have another meal. Well, speaking of restaurants, restaurants are often mentioned on this show as part of people's favorite things in the San Gabriel Valley, but we're going to get to know some of your favorite things in the San Gabriel Valley.
This is our SGV 3. We call this part of the program.
Specific to SGV.
Yeah, San Gabriel Valley. Your favorite places or things to do or
San Gabriel Valley.
Yeah. So 3 right here locally.
Okay.
Which is a big territory.
Can we talk about anything?
Yeah, anything.
Underground nightclubs.
Yeah.
we got a young person here. We shouldn't.
Well, you can. Oh, you're talking about me?
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm young. I don't need to hear some of this.
Okay. Because you've gone through some of these.
Oh, I've been there. Oh no. Okay. All right. Well, what's one? What's your favorite or one of your most favorite places or things?
Well, first of all, I'm a foodie. I've always loved to eat since I was a kid, and so we're very blessed the fact that in San Gabriel Valley, there's so many restaurants. It's almost like, there's like 10 restaurants on each block at least. Different types of food. I personally, I guess among the Asian foods, and now we just first talk about Asian foods, right? Among the Asian food, I think
Panda Express.
No. Well, that would be Chinese. I'm talking about category of food, right?
Yeah. Sorry, continue.
Japanese. I really like Japanese food. Yeah, and the good Japanese restaurant used to stay away from San Gabriel Valley for some reasons. It wasn't until maybe about 5 years ago there's been an influx of fairly well-known Japanese chain restaurants that have opened shop in San Gabriel Valley. Right, most of them are ramen joints, but they're really good. My second highest choice for Asian food actually is Korean. I think Chinese probably would be my last choice. Right, I love Korean food because I lived in Korea for 3.5 years. My first wife was Korean. My kids are half Korean, so I have a tendency to want to eat Korean.
So do you want to name, a good Japanese, a good Korean, or do you have other things in your top 3 that you want to talk about?
Other than food?
Yeah.
Well, yes. I love music. And ever since karaoke came to being, I just become a karaoke fan for some reason. So tonight I'll be singing karaoke with some friends.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And yes, and in the valley, there's what used to be. After the pandemic, I don't know what changes we're going to be seeing. But used to be there's quite a few karaoke places, and also there's restaurants that also have karaoke machine that you could use during and after dinner. And I think the third thing that I really enjoy the most is I guess I have a lot of friends in the valley. And we get together, we go hiking and we get together for drinks and for food. And I think the valley offers quite a few choices, hiking trails, of course, and also, food selection. So I've lived in the San Gabriel Valley for, almost 40 years.
Wow.
And I've actually, seen the valley, change.
Yeah, you saw it really develop.
Well, it's like Walnut. When I moved in, it was like 12,000 people. And now Walnut is 31,000 people. Walnut was voted as the number 1 place to live in California with population of under 50,000 by CNN and Money Magazine. We voted twice. Number 1 in the entire state of California.
And you still live there in the same house that you've always lived in.
Same house that I always lived in. Yeah. It's like Warren Buffett, right? You make so much money, but you still get me that tiny little house.
Is Warren Buffett as rich as you?
I think I'm richer in the sense that I know more languages.
Well, certainly food and hiking has been the most common SGV3 pick for most of our guests.
Really?
Yeah.
Hiking?
Yeah. Hiking. Yeah. The
food
trails.
I could imagine, but hiking, huh?
Yeah. Oh, and actually, I'm sorry, you probably developed those hiking trails in Walnut, didn't you?
Yes. Actually, I've been hiking and walking as a sport.
But didn't you, as the mayor, didn't you oversee the development of those?
Yes. If you've been to Walnut, you realize that in Walnut we have 17 miles of what used to be equestrian trails. But because the number of horse property owners has diminished, has gone down in the last 10, 20 years, so the city, we decided to convert the equestrian trails to hiking trails as well. Before it was just for horses. So now it's for both horses and people. So so in Walnut, because of the terrain, right, there's a lot of nice places to go, walking and hiking. Yes, so that's when I developed that my hobby, I guess. So now I walk between 4 to 8 miles every day. Different places, not just Walnut, not just San Gabriel Valley. Sometimes I go to Santa Monica, Newport, to walk. It's funny, when I was in the hospital with COVID, I didn't even think that I could walk one of these days. And now...
And you lost 45 pounds.
I lost 35 pounds.
35 pounds. And that's... Your frame is already small. You can imagine 35 pounds off of him.
Well, that was like... Well, I weighed 150 and I lost 35 pounds. So if you do the math, I lost a significant percentage of my...
23%.
See, I knew he would come up with that. I didn't need a calculator. 23% over a month and a half. That's pretty drastic.
Yeah.
Pretty dramatic. Yeah. And so I'm just so happy that I'm still alive here to talk to Russell and talk to you, Scott.
Well, you survived that, and you have your daughters and grandchild to enjoy. What are you looking forward to next in the next coming years?
I feel so relaxed in this conversation that I want to tell you about something that could be embarrassing to other people. The next thing that I really want to happen to me in the next few years, hopefully is the next few days or next few weeks, next few months, is to find a relationship, a girlfriend, that is. Yeah, because I'm currently, divorced, and people say, "Oh, marriages, they're no good." I just love it. So I'm looking forward to finding someone to start a relationship with.
Sure.
I know it's kind of private, but why not? You asked me that,
Yeah.
So I don't want to lie. I want to tell you my honest answer.
Well, the thing is, I'm sure having gone through COVID, for example, you realize, like things that maybe people find embarrassing or whatever, it's not that important. I mean, you can talk the truth about things, talk honestly about things. I mean, why would you not want to share things like that?
Well, just like COVID, in my culture, right? I mean, you don't want to tell people that you have COVID, because people have these, what do you call those? Not prejudices.
But just preconceptions.
Preconceptions about, you had COVID. Even though you are treated fully, but I still think that you might have COVID, that you infect me. Some people still have those mentalities, and so I've decided to go public with my COVID thing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'm working with the Methodist Hospital to try to talk to the community about my COVID experiences about that. So I've been on different shows, radio shows and TV shows to talk about my COVID experiences, which I think would be...
And I remember you saying that Arcadia Methodist was an extraordinary hospital.
Yes, it was. And I think I owe my life to them, because when I got into the hospital that night, my blood oxygen was 86. We should be around 95 and above, right? And they always say that if your oxygen in your blood dropped to below 90, see a doctor. My blood pressure was 150 over something, and I'm usually like 120 over something. My body temperature, 103. My heart rate was like 130 or something. So when I went to Methodist Hospital, I went through triage, right? Immediately they admitted me, and I was told by the nurse the next day saying that I could have died the day before, because my vital signs were just not very impressive. And I really thought I was dying that night. So you're right, Scott. After, we hear about people who've gone through traumatic experiences, right? And how those experiences reshape their life. And now I've gone through one in my life, and I think that's an understatement. Not only has it reshaped my life, I think it had also, one thing that I should want to share that with you. One thing that I did when I was in the hospital, thinking that I was going to die of COVID, was to write my enemies. Yes, I have enemies. Emails or text messages.
Wow. And what was the response like?
Most of them didn't respond.
I guess you do have enemies.
I do. And one of them responded kind of, lukewarmly,
Really?
I mean, in
Wow.
my messages, I was very sincere. I said, hey, look, I have COVID. I have no idea what's going to happen to me, right? And I was going to let you know that I really treasure the time that I spend with you, even though we have some disagreements. Yeah, I put it in a very nice way, yeah. But I know for me to reach out to my enemies, I know that was a big breakthrough for me. Because we all have our pride, right?
Yeah.
Why should I? Why doesn't he come and apologize to me? But hey, man, it's okay. Who no matter whose fault it is, I want to be the first one to offer the apology, and I think that's a great feeling. It really took off a big boulder off my shoulder, really.
Now I know why you emailed me.
And now I know why you did not respond to me.
Well, Joaquin, thank you for sharing all that. I learned so much more about you as a person and the things that you've gone through, and more so your character and your values. I always share with Scott that it's values that unite people and keep them together over shared interests, because those are very fleeting. So
Right.
Thank you for sharing your story with us and with our listeners.
Well, thank you for having me, guys. Appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thanks again for spending this time with us. If you're new to the show, please consider subscribing, and always drop us a line on our website, www.sgvmasterkey.com. And we look forward to spending some time with you again next week. Thank you.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the SGV Master Key. You can find the full back catalog of the SGV Master Key at sgvmasterkey.com and wherever you get your podcasts. This show was produced and edited by Russell Mono and Victoria Allers of Kind Monster Productions. Thanks again for listening or watching. We'll see you again real soon in the next episode.
Nice mother. No, kind mother.